Welcome back. The panel is joining us from their remote locations. NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent ANDREA Mitchell. Journalist Robert Draper, author of the new book, To Start a War, How the Bush Administration Took America into Iraq. And Heather McGhee of the civil rights advocacy group Color of Change. It's good to see all of you. Andrea, I want to sort of start things off simply with this interesting quote from Alex Burns in the New York Times about president's behavior, essentially referring to the president as a heckler in his own administration. Let me read the whole quote up here, if we can bring it up. And you look here, far from a strong man, Mr. Trump has lately become a heckler in his own government, promoting medical conspiracy theories on social media, playing no constructive role in either the management of the coronavirus pandemic or the negotiation of an economic rescue plan in Congress, and complaining endlessly about the unfairness of it all. You know, Andrea, it seems as if the president's like given up on doing the job of being president.
Exactly. I mean, he's on the golf course for the second day in a row as the negotiators from his own administration are struggling with the Hill and a divided Republican Senate. So it's a four-way conversation now, but he's not part of it. And so the benefits have run out. He's not contributing. He's not only heckling from the side, but he's creating misinformation, retweeting that viral video of the suspicious doctor and her miracle cures, which went around the world, if not, and all over the United States. And so there's no message in the campaign. And they talk about, after suspending, getting back on the air, but he keeps undermining the message which he briefly tried to get back on track. And you can't cure the economy unless you cure the pandemic. And you can't cure the pandemic if the president is sending bad messages and belatedly coming to masks, but undermining all of the efforts and attacking Dr. Fauci and the other experts.
You know, Heather McGhee, it's funny that Andrea brings up this messaging issue. Let me play for you this clip of the president. He went to Florida on Friday. He didn't really talk about the crisis that's in Florida right now with the virus, but instead he read the following remarks trying to scare folks about a Joe Biden presidency. Take a listen.
In Joe Biden's America, you and your family will never be safe. Rioters and criminals will be totally protected. Law-abiding citizens will be totally disarmed. And American families will be at the mercy of the violent left-wing mob that you've been watching on television.
Look, there's both the reality, the picture he's painting and the reality don't match. But also, what is he talking about there when he's not talking about the virus or the economic pain we're in?
This is his playbook. But what we know now is that it's not working. And in fact, it's backfiring. Because of his ham-fisted and demonizing and divisive reactions to the peaceful demonstrations across this country, the Black Lives Matter movement, which seems to be the largest protest movement in American history. It looks like Donald Trump is on track to do something with white voters that hasn't been done since Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act and Republicans started their sort of racialized strategy, which is actually lose the white vote. Joe Biden is now leading with white voters. And why is that? It's not in spite of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's because of it. Because it's enormously popular. It's made a moral awakening in this country. And he's losing the suburbs because of it. He's losing the suburbs because he's still trying to race bait and divide us at a time where, you've got big suburban houses with lawn signs that say Black Lives Matter.
You know, Robert, when going through your book and thinking about having you on this week, and I'm glad you stuck with the Iraq theme. You stuck with what you've been working on for years in covering the Bush administration. I'm old enough to remember when Bush was the stubborn one, when Bush wasn't hearing what the public was hearing. Compare the two in crisis here. What do you see versus what you covered with Iraq?
Yeah, sure, Chuck. I mean, I think that what the two have in common is that both presidents were telling a story to the American public that was not grounded in the facts. Back in 2002 and 2003, what President Bush was saying was Saddam Hussein is dangerous, just like the people who attacked us on 9/11. And because he is evil, like the people who attacked us on 9/11, these evildoers will likely confederate and join in attacking us. Therefore, we must attack Iraq first. I mean, almost everything I said to you there didn't have any basis in facts. And, that in a way, we're now at a kind of perverse evolution from that point in time to where we are now with a president who says we've got it under control, certainly more under control than other countries do. We're the envy of the world, in fact. Now we need to reopen, and the Democrats don't want to reopen because they hate America. The crucial difference between these two is that back then President Bush had the trust of the American people. This president has forfeited that trust.
Yeah, Andrea, it is that trust issue where you and I think it's leading a lot of people to wonder, what's left. I think the fact that he's not involved on Capitol Hill, the fact that Senate Republicans have pretty much 20 different ideas of what to do, it seems as if elected Republicans are losing faith in President Trump right now.
Well, they certainly pushed back immediately on his suggestion about delaying the election, but I haven't seen them stand up against him on a lot of these other issues. Yes, the payroll tax cut. Looks like they don't want it. He still does. And maybe they're narrowing their differences as we speak, we hope, on Capitol Hill. But I don't think that elected Republicans are yet running away from him because they're so embedded with him, they really have no other choice except to hope that he can somehow discredit and undermine the election results and push down and suppress the black vote and minority vote. That's their only hope in many of these places.
Heather, I know you wanted to jump in before we go.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. McConnell, pushed back against this delay in the election, but he's doing nothing to protect the Postal Service, which is what is actually going to, the sabotage from within of the Postal Service by Trump's mega donor is what's actually going to create delays and a risk and chaos in our elections. So they need to walk the walk and not just talk the talk.
And you just bring up a point. I mean, as we erode institutions, we're now going to erode trust in the delivery mechanisms of the United States Postal Service too? Anyway. Hello from Washington, I'm Chuck Todd, and thanks for checking out the Meet the Press channel on YouTube. Click on the button down here to subscribe and click over here to watch the latest interviews, highlights, and other digital exclusives.